All right, that took about 8 seconds.
There you go. Don't you just love a cue that comes in without its audio? That seems like an entirely appropriate start for the SM Advanced Forum.
Right.
Let's have a little bit of this then. Let's take you back a few years. Now, some of you tuned in might recognize a few faces on this feed, and especially if you've ever used an email system. You might have also been on the original Streaming Media Advanced Forum, which was obviously. Now, some of you tuned in might recognize a few faces in the background there. Some of you can going to have an echo of my voice, and it's already too much for you. But yes, as some of you will probably remember, a long time ago, back in the distant past, there was an email list server which streamingmedia.com started. And there was a surprising number of geeks on that list feed, and all of them seemed to be passionate about streaming. Anyway, some of us are still around, and somewhere in the background, I'm joined by two other of the erstwhile Advanced Forum members. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Eric, go first, since your name starts with an E and mine starts with a T.
Sure. Hey, I'm Eric Schumacher Rasmussen, the editor of StreamingMedia.com, and I'm not sure why my picture is not on the screen, but been with Streaming Media for about 12 years now.
And Eric, I can actually see you. I think you can't see yourself, but again, we'll talk about that kind of thing because
there we go.
Technical issues. So I'm Tim Siglin. I'm a contributing editor for Streaming Media, and at this point, I'm the principal media strategist for Real Solver Incorporated.
Cool, and obviously I'm Don Robinson, and some of you have been bored to tears both on the Streaming Media Advanced Forum and by my writings, which Eric very eruditely edits and ensures that they contain no nonsense at all. Don't you, Eric?
I do my best, sir.
Excellent. So what's this all about? Well, basically, the Advanced Forum was always a wonderful platform for people having a bit of a backroom engineering chat about the things that they loved in the space and the things that they hated. About the latest technologies, and a little bit of bullying about who obviously had different opinions and so on. So we aim to bring that all back to life on this with our monthly podcasts or monthly live streams. I don't know whether to call this a podcast or not, really. I think, well, there's a topic. We'll put that on the list. But what we wanted to do is just sort of give people a bit of a break from the hard sell techie presentations, which we all have to grab all the information we can from on our daily working lives, and more adjourn to the bar and have a little bit of a chat about the topics that need less structure and a little bit more woolly thinking. So I think first of all, I hope Tim, Eric, those are the sort of things that you're expecting to do over the next few months while we kick this into motion.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to put a pitch in for the fact that you got a book coming out, right, Tom?
Oh, I've got a book coming out, yeah. You haven't seen this yet. You haven't seen this yet. Look, a self-print copy.
No.
But it's not actually going to look like that. It's going to look hardback and quite a lot more posh.
Will it say Dom Robinson or Dominic Robinson? Because that's...
No, only my mum calls me Dominic. Makes me sit upright like I've done something wrong. What?
Exactly. When my mom calls me Timothy, it's the same way.
Yeah, exactly. So no, always Dom, even at the bank somehow managed to get away with that. So yeah, book coming out. Lots of waffle about content delivery networks and those sort of things. More continuing in the vein of my informal chat about anecdotes and things that have gone wrong. And I'm sure we'll dip in and plug from there in due course. So I think we'll have a little chat about what we're hoping to get done with the Advanced Forum over the next few months, and some of the events that we might pop up at, as much as doing a regular monthly show. We're also, at this point, we do want you to get in touch with us and to let us know if you'd like to join us here in the chat room one month. If you've got strong opinions or just generally like to be frivolous and rude about people in the streaming industry, then you'll be very welcome. This is entirely not affiliated with our day jobs. Almost, I'll just cover my work badge there. So most importantly, Eric doesn't get sued into oblivion by various, I don't know how litigious the American press associations can be, but I'm sure we've got to be a little careful about what we say.
Right.
But I haven't got well, actually, I'll tell you what, if I wear the Streaming Media hat, then they can sue me and have nothing to do with you. So yeah, a little bit of that, and then obviously a little bit of sensible conversation somewhere down the line about trends and things. So, any topics that spring to mind, guys? Anything you'd like to kick us off with?
Well, let's actually kick off, Dom, with sort of the trial by fire that we did over the last 2 hours. And let me recap to make sure that I've got it right. The way we've got the structure set up, of course, people can come to SMAdvancedForum.com and they can click to an embed of the YouTube channel. And the YouTube channel, of course, is SM Advanced Forum as well. What was interesting is as we went through that process and we chose to use Hangouts for those of us who participate, and there's a chat there for those of us who participate, we wanted a public chat, which we decided to use the YouTube chat, which seems to be a pretty nice thing. We can embed the YouTube chat as an individual iframe, or we can have it an iframe that has both the live video and the chat. But what I found really interesting is when I subscribed to the channel, it would show me the on-demand clips that were there. It would tell me that I had the on-demand clips +1. The +1 was the live one that was about ready to go live, but it didn't actually let me see a countdown clock. And I find that really interesting. I mean, maybe the model is sort of the Facebook Live model of you subscribe and the moment somebody goes live, it tells you. But I would think with YouTube sort of trying to go into live television, live linear, TV everywhere, alongside its on demand, that it would need to treat those as sort of equal citizens.
Yeah, I'm not convinced it's slick yet. I mean, I can probably do a screen share just to show some of the punters what we've found. Let me just make sure we don't get a massive amount of video feedback when I do that. So if I switch my feed to my desktop, can I just confirm that you guys can see that?
Yep, I can see that.
So now what we can see, now we've gone live, we can actually see that in our channel feed, the advanced forum, it says live now, and there's 3 watching, which is jolly good because being our first week, if it was more than that, I'd be a bit concerned. But if we go to the main web page, what I was hoping was that we'd have had the live feed automatically populating this top large box, but that is pulling from our channel. But even after I refresh it a few times, we are not seeing the live feed embedded in the window. Now, quite how to get that live feed so that it just automatically plays this week's in the big window and then has the previous week's populating this box underneath, which would be the ideal, is yet to be done. And there's also the issue that we have the capability in the live feed. If I go to the live feed itself here, you can actually chat with us down here and let us know what you'd like us to be talking about, or ask me to shut up and let the others get a word in edgeways and things like that. But we haven't got a way to get this live chat smoothly embedded into the main window. We did try to put a pop-up chat box here, but this is still linked to a chat window which we had open for the test site some hours ago. So it leaves the streaming engineer quite a lot of things to do instead of just pressing a red button and going live, which
And again, I think it's great that it shows it that we're live now, but I really, really wish that it would give, if we have a 60-minute countdown clock, I wish that people who would come to the subscription would actually see, oh, there's an event that's going to come up. Because I got to tell you, when we were doing the Facebook Live interviews in New York for Streaming Media East, people would be alerted at the moment that the thing happened, but ideally what I'd like is for it to alert somebody 5 minutes prior to it if they're a subscriber, so they had a chance to get a coffee or, as you say, Dom, beers in the chiller, and then, to be able to sit down and be ready for it, as opposed to missing the first 2 to 3 minutes because they're scrambling to try to watch the video.
Yeah.
Right, and another thing I've just noticed is monitoring the YouTube feed. It says that there are 5 people watching now, so that's the 3 of us plus 2 other people, but it doesn't tell us who else is watching.
That's a good point. And Eric, actually, one of those other people was me. I pulled it up on the phone and walked in the other room to see what it looked like. But you're absolutely right. I clicked to try to figure out who was watching, and it doesn't tell me at all.
Yeah, which is why, I mean, for other webcasts I do, the chat room is an integral bit of getting a sense that you're talking to someone. It's the text us a message for the radio show, or it's the call us for a shout out on live on air. We very much want to encourage that interactivity. I think that is possible if you go to directly to the YouTube link. Some of that stuff is in the web page, But the problem is I don't know how to promote youtube.com/watch?v=ZLIOEK.
You got to remember some of those are caps as opposed to lowercase.
The calling URL. So I want to embed this, but I don't want to have to try and gather all of that while I'm actually also trying to be on air.
Right.
So yeah, initial experiences have raised some questions there.
Well, and you know what's interesting, Eric's been around a long time. Dom, you and I have been around a bit longer than Eric. We remember when, you know, the two guys who started YouTube would show up at the shows, and this was not the kind of thing that they would have ever envisioned. So it's great that it's grown, kind of like when Justin showed up for Justin TV, which then became Twitch, which got sold to Amazon for a hefty amount of money. I mean, he would not have envisioned people doing esports on it. But the point is, to me, it feels like breaking news as opposed to a scheduled broadcast or cable network. And I think that's really where YouTube needs to go.
Yeah, I don't know. This is nearly perfect for us. Maybe every use case is different, but there's some elements in this which are just not smooth, not working quite right for me. And I'm sure somebody will get on the email and say, guys, you're just pressing all the wrong buttons and doing it. But to be honest, it should be obvious enough that my granny can do it, and if it's not, then it's not good enough yet.
Ideal. Yeah. All right. So let's move off that topic, and hopefully YouTube will actually come back to us and say, oh yeah, here are the buttons, Dom, and we're going to give you the special Dom Red button, just like we have at Staples here in the U.S.
That's what
So Eric, I wanted to ask you a question. You know, music's a huge part of your life, and you've written occasionally about music in streaming media. We seem to be at a point where the music industry has slightly recovered, and you know, now obviously digital streams are counted in, you know, everything from Billboard, etc. Is your sense that it's recovered at a contracted level, or that it's going to start growing again as we figure out the transition from CDs to streaming to, you know, digital?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's going on is reflected in a column in a newsletter that I used to subscribe to called Rock and Roll Confidential, that turned into Rock and Rat Confidential. And they had a frequent column called Who Needs the Music Industry Anyway? And what that points to, and it was all about, you know, essentially other ways to get music that circumvented the music industry. That didn't necessarily mean illegal, quote unquote, illegal downloads, but it talked about other ways people share music. And a music critic that I follow quite regularly, Ann Powers, she writes for NPR, and, you know, she pointed out that, you know, if you just look at SoundCloud right now, there's way more music in just, let's say, the hip hop category on SoundCloud than anyone could possibly keep up with.
That's a good point. Bandcamp is sort of the same way. It's people out there making music, but not necessarily having it filter up to popular levels of listening. Right.
And so will the music industry ever rebound from its pre-Napster, pre-digital era, or to its pre-Napster, pre-digital era levels? Probably not. But there's more music available online than was ever available in any CD store or record store. I think the vinyl explosion it's overblown a bit in the press. You know, people like to think that there's this, and sure, vinyl, you know, sales of vinyl are huge, but there's so much more music being shared right now than ever was before, just like there's so much more video being shared than was ever possible in the past. So it's overwhelming.
I saw the movie Baby Driver yesterday, and there was an integral scene where the song Baby, it was an Ella song. Of course, he had to go get vinyl in a record, which I found fascinating, because they're certainly giving a nod to the fact that even though this kid listens to an iPod all day long, there are some songs he will not be able to get in the digital domain at the moment. Right.
And that's one of the things that people on the music journalism side of things have been commenting on about the movie, is that it so prominently features this classic 160 gigabyte iPod, right? Which you can't get anymore. And people who are huge music fans, so many of them that I know, just they're still heartbroken over the discontinuation of that model, because no matter how big your phone is, you can't fit as many tunes as you could on that iPod.
Well, and what's crazy about that too is I know people who loaded their iPods years ago. They no longer have, for whatever reason, you know, legit or illegit, don't have access to that playlist on iTunes. And so once their hard drive dies on that classic, they're going to lose that music.
Right.
They don't really have a way to clone that. As you say, they can't clone a 160 down to a 32 or a 64. And so I know a number of people who are buying on eBay or Craigslist the old 30-pin iHome players, speakers, strictly because of the fact that they still have all that music on there. So that's an interesting point.
Right, and let's face it, the biggest the biggest source of music for most people right now is, and let's go back to it, it's YouTube. You know, so many people, when they want to hear music, and this goes from this spans the entire age gamut, they go to YouTube and they start playing music off YouTube, and they either run it through some decent speakers connected to their computer, or they use the Bluetooth and run it to an Amazon Echo speaker or something like that. So, you know.
And yet in that way, we're sort of wasting video bandwidth, aren't we? Because every one of those audio clips or every one of those songs comes with either somebody who's built a lyrics PowerPoint, played his video at a real, you know, or is the official sort of Vivo music thing. And the music video makes sense, but why would I want to consume 4 times the amount of bandwidth just to listen to it on an audio speaker? And I'm not even going to be looking at the YouTube video.
Right. But that's, I mean, that's where because so often when you do a search for a song on YouTube, what you get is a record company sponsored, record company published. It's just a screenshot of the album cover and the song title for 4.5 minutes. Right.
Or what I most especially love is the lyrics that don't actually say what the lyrics say. That somebody created a PowerPoint and they think they're hearing something, but they're clearly not hearing it. So
totally.
I think there's a change to the nature of music. I think there's a I'm going to coin a new term here because I like doing that. There's a cultural drag, like a fiscal drag. I think there's a cultural drag. I saw I've seen quite a few bands recently just going out of their way to just stream live from straight to Facebook, and I think that's going to change slowly as it matures and becomes a more accepted, more normal way to discover music. I can see, you know, there was a band that was streaming for about 3 hours, and it was quite interesting because I saw it pop up on someone's feed, and then about half an hour later, someone else who I didn't know knew the first person, they streamed, and as this went round, the live counter in the top left corner of the Facebook stream was clocking up some significant numbers. And I think that's a sort of virtuous cycle as well. I think that's a completely new format. You know, that's pub gigging without earning any money, which was for the last 10 years. People thought, well, musicians aren't going to make money out of royalty. At least they can carry on making money out of live performance. Now they're giving it away for free live on social media. I think, you know.
Well, and think about this as a modern equivalent of the Grateful Dead bootlegs. If you run your practice sessions as live Facebook streams, to me, what will happen is it will actually increase the interest in people coming to see you live. Yeah, so, you know, you may get some of the intra-band conflict. That's fine. It makes you more human from that standpoint. But if I want, you know, if I want it as an anticipatory run-up, and this kind of goes back to my point about having a countdown clock on YouTube, if I have an anticipatory run-up to them coming to my city, and I'm able to watch their practice streams over the course of the 2 weeks prior, to me, that absolutely drives the desire to come see them live.
I'm going to make an interesting leap there. I was having a conversation just half an hour ago with someone about VR, and we were both a bit cynical about the uptake of VR. And I think just
not you, Dom. Come on, you're never cynical about this.
I'm cynical about everything. As soon as you put a headset on, you're unable to catch the eye and watch the body language of the people you're with, and it ceases communal experience. And I think the same, that you know, it doesn't really matter how much of a band you've had for free. The experience of going to see that band with friends, or maybe with the potential of meeting other people who also like the band, it's the social activity that's actually incredibly important. And I think, in some ways, the complete collapse of the music industry over the last decade, or let's not call it collapse, but the change in the music industry over the last decade has been because actually what was happening was we were being forced into this kind of monopolized relationship where really music was when a record label sold you something for an impossible to value markup based on its monopoly. Once that went away, we thought music went away, but it didn't. I think we returned to something which was much more of its social function and the way we engage with other people who are at the event. It's not about the band; it's about going to the band, see the band with people.
And let's face it, you know, over the vast majority of human history, that is the function that music has served, or one of the functions.
Absolutely. And music was financed by patronage and sponsorship,
right,
rather than by royalty. And I think the royalty model has skewed things for 60 or 70 years, and we had a cultural drag as that came through, and we're waiting for that to pass. And maybe we'll go back to something that we were in before, but I don't know.
So Dom, I had one viewer send me a text that they have to drop off, but they love listening to your accent. So perhaps you need to go out and do an album for those of us in America. You know, maybe sing.
I'll have to tune into Thursday night show, hear Mr. B playing then, because
there we go. Thursday night show. People tune in.
On later tonight. plug.
So one last question on that, and back to you, Eric. Is so let's say we're doing this where it is sort of the run up to the live event. Do bands run into a problem with copyright? I mean, because as I talked about with the Dead, with encouraging people to essentially bootleg and then come to their live concerts, do bands run into a problem of actually having their music sort of absconded with because they're doing these live, multiple live events, or does it become even more valuable to see them physically live as opposed to virtually live?
That's a really good question. I think Dom's right that it in the end, the upside for musicians is a lot greater than the downside in terms of, no matter how many YouTube or Facebook streams of live performances you see, it's never going to replace that going to a club or going to an arena and sharing that with dozens or thousands of other people. The copyright question that you bring up is an interesting one, and I find it more interesting when it comes to video and comedians. Is that most comedians are understandably far more controlling of what videos people share when they're at the shows. I saw Patton Oswalt about a month ago, and the second anybody pulled out their iPhone, security was on them like that. Because unlike music, if you hear the joke, hearing the joke the second or third time is rarely the same as hearing it the first time. Now, some of us used to listen to comedy albums back in the day, and people still listen to comedy and listen to the same bits over and over again. But unlike musicians, comedians need to be a lot more. It hurts comedians a lot more if, let's say, a copy of an entire Patton Oswalt set gets posted on YouTube.
Well, and it's interesting you say that because Russell Peters did a documentary, a couple of years ago where he basically showed himself doing the same jokes across multiple cities, and the timing grew better over the time that he did it. And he would try jokes out. To me, I think it's not just comedians, it's probably also spoken word like poetry and that kind of thing. Any place where there's an impact. So theater or monologues could even be the same type of thing. Inspiration.
Just to dive in with a comment there, I've often just sort of looking at music, I've often thought that, like, there's a, what's his name, Marcel Proust wrote about remembrance of things past, wrote about association of smells, just bring back intense, vivid memories. And I think music is in just the same way. It sort of labels certain periods or certain events in your life. And so actually, if you just listen to music in isolation, it's almost valueless. Whereas if I think about some of the big bands that I've seen or worked with or done webcasts for, it's the event of it's the whole. Every time I hear the music, it evokes the whole occasion or several occasions where I've heard that tune and associated that with them, and that can't be taken away, whatever format you hear it from, and whatever means you hear it from. That's the real value for me.
That's an interesting point, Dom, and it's actually a positive and a negative, because there are some songs that I've got a good friend, she went through a breakup recently. She cannot hear a song. There's a particular song, and in fact, I was talking to her, she was with her new boyfriend, that song came on the radio twice in an hour, and both times she said she told him to change the station, because it wasn't that the song was good, it was that the song evoked something that reminded her of the past that she wasn't ready to go back and deal with.
Yeah.
For better or for worse.
Completely with you there.
All right. Well, that was thanks, Eric. I just was curious from a music standpoint what your.
Do you guys use Spotify or Apple Music or any of those sort of unlimited library access?
Yeah, I use both of them. And as Tim pointed out earlier, there are always going to be songs that you can't get on one service that you can get on another service. We saw that this last week with the new Jay-Z album only being available on Tidal.
And those of us who have Sprint phones are actually able to listen to it, but nobody else.
Right, exactly. I use whatever service gets me the music I want at the time, and some of them are better at compiling playlists than others. I probably use Spotify more than anything else. How about you guys?
So I tried Apple Music for a period of time and had a friend who she's heavily a Spotify user. And what she found was she could get most of the music on Spotify. She could get it on Apple Music, but she did not like the interface. The interface was not comfortable to her. The adding things to a queue or a playlist was sort of a foreign approach. I personally, and I think, Eric, you and I talked about this maybe a year ago. The problem is if you wanted to get all the music in the world right now, it would cost you about $60 a month, because you'd have to subscribe to 6 different services. At some point, that may change, but I think we see the same model with Amazon Prime Video versus Netflix versus HBO. That the reasons that companies do exclusivity is to drag you into their ecosystem. But to me, if you run that model for video, it'll be 2 times as expensive as if you run that model for audio. And I don't understand. I'm still old school enough. I own most of the music, so I purchased it on iTunes. But again, I'm probably one of those people who I don't have a 160 gig iPod, but I got an 80 gig iPod. And I just, I fear the day that I'm going to have to then replace that with renting the music. And to me, that's the hang up, honestly, from my side, is I don't like renting the music. I'd rather own it, because I tend to travel in places where I can't get connectivity. And yes, I know I can download some of the music, but if I'm traveling over the end of a month, I'm going to lose that music, that access to that music, because I can't can't reauthorize it.
So I've got I use a combination of iTunes with the download and my own sort of archive of MP3s in it, and I use Spotify. One of the USPs for Spotify is it plugs into an app I've got called DJ, and I use that weekly on the Thursday night show. I use that a lot for mixing music. So I've got both the iTunes library and Spotify directly plugged into the decks. Which if I go to spontaneously go to a friend's party or something, or if I'm playing on air on the radio show and I suddenly think, oh, I quite like that tune. Is there anything else by that artist? It's instantly to hand. It's instantly available, and that isn't that Spotify is the only entity that I've seen that has done a plugin like that. There may be more. Please get in touch if you're out there and you've got one. That would be interesting. But the combination's good because then I find tunes that are floor killers that I want to keep forever, and that goes down on the 99p purchase list, and I buy that, and once I've got it permanently, then I can start to do other things. For example, you're not allowed to press the record facility directly in the digital decks when you're playing a Spotify tune.
Exactly.
So you are once it's through on your own hard drive and so on. So I'm not quite sure how that all works, but in terms of the law. But just one last thing that's kind of interesting. Something else I found curious that's changed is quite often I've been remixing tunes. So I take a really hard dance tune and a classic old rock tune and play them together. And as I've built up a sort of archive of individual tunes that I've done that to, that I then might play out myself, I thought, oh, that'd be quite interesting. I wonder if I could release a compilation album. So I got in touch with the PRS and MCPS over here, who are Performing Rights Society and Mechanical Copyright Protection Society. There, I don't know what is it. Sound.
Think about that term, the mechanical copyright.
Mm-hmm.
It's clearly an 1800s description as opposed to a 21st century.
Caxton Press. Anyway, the interesting thing is I went to them and I said, look, there's clearly an innovative step. You know, if I picked up a door and I picked up I don't know, an oar, and I'd turn the thing into a canoe, I'd probably be able to go and patent that as an invention, because I've created an inventive step by combining two things. So in some ways, although I've got two derivative works which I've simply overlaid, if in layman's terms, I've simply overlaid them to create a new work. It's still new, it's still identifiably mine, it's still unique to me. So if I release that, how did the royalties work? It was quite interesting, the response. Basically, they said, quite frankly, just release it on iTunes or Spotify, and as you actually upload it in there, they'll ask you for the details about the derivative works, and we'll sort it out with YouTube and Spotify.
So essentially they're using the gatekeeping of YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Facebook, because Facebook has a similar thing. I was at a trade show in Orlando 2 weeks ago. I posted a video of a video wall, but it happened to be the song X's and O's was playing in the background. Yep. And it immediately said to me, you can't upload this video because of the fact that you don't own this material. So that's really odd, Dom, that they're having the assumption that if it's allowable to one of those, that
the math sort of worked out that I would get a fee for the sale of the song, and then some of that money would be kept back by the paywall, for want of a better generic term of them.
Sure.
And some of that would be kept back to pay to the PRS and MCPS, and they would have their own logging and auditing system, which they'd agreed with the PRS and MCPS, so that they could somehow work out how to apportion that chunk of the royalty. So let's say it's a pound or a dollar or whatever you want to call it. Let's say 40p goes off to 40 cents goes off to iTunes to cover bandwidth and service and hosting costs or whatever that may be. There's then 60p left, out of which I would get a commission for selling it and what my creative step. So I would get a chunk of that for being the artist whose music's been sold. But then so that might be, say, another, I don't know, 30, 40p. So there'd be around about 20p left, which would be, I'm not accounting for tax here, but there'd then be a chunk left, which would be sent into the PRS and MCPS as a royalty fee. And then the MCPS and PRS would go, okay, we'll aggregate all that money together, and then we'll get some logs at the end of the year, and we'll divvy the money out according to how often a particular tune's being played by a particular artist on the logs. And so the PRS would come out with a sort of fair way to distribute the royalties. In this particular instance, actually, I would still see my 30 or 40p before the money goes off into the royalty tank. And then, because in theory, that a third of the music is one artist, a third of the music is another artist, and a third of the music was mine. If I was then an affiliated member of the PRS, the royalty would be split 3 ways between us. So I would see another third of that money back. So it's quite interesting that, you know, I think that comes down to the fact that the content delivery platforms can audit in a way that the PRS simply can't. So they have to rely on that. They would rather just go, do you know,
Eric, don't you love the fact that Dom has worked out a financial problem around the copyright problem? He's just, you know, I would hate to see him as a hedge fund derivative guy.
Oh, absolutely.
90% of the money back, you know, and legally have it all. But Dom, what's interesting about that, so besides the gatekeeper, essentially what your two groups are doing over there, which would be similar to probably what ASCAP would do over here, they're using Spotify as a rainy day bank. In other words, it's the money's going to go in there. We know that a certain percentage of all music played through Spotify, a certain percentage of the money for all music played is going to go back to your two government groups or industry groups. They may not know where it fits, but because they're asking Spotify to hold that money, or asking iTunes to hold that money, they can then come up with a reason as to why they should have that money. And I find that fascinating. So it's not necessarily about copyright anymore. It's about, we assume that whatever you put up is going to get, you know, there's going to be some dollar amount against it that the artist is going to receive.
And that's all too frequently, though, in when it comes to Spotify and Pandora, that's all too frequently not an actual dollar amount. It's more a 9 cents or 12 cents per quarter amount.
I'm saying dollars in a aspirational way, not
right.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. So many expectations have been set. One thing we do, just interesting, they have a small webcasters over here. They have a scheme called the Limited Online Music License. So for our internet radio show, we pay £185 a year, and we don't have to provide any logging. As long as we don't have more than, I think it's 150,000 listeners in the year. And that saves the overhead of creating a logging technology stack, if you like. One of the things I like doing is when we have artists performing their own music on our show, I take great pleasure every year when I apply for the next year's MCPS PRS Limited Online Music License, in saying, by the way, Mr. B or Professor Elemental or this DJ or that artist was on performing entirely his own music for an entire night, but that's 1/52th of that money should be distributed to them. And actually, bless them, I didn't expect them to do this, but if you volunteer a log, they will adhere to that and they will apportion royalty to them. So I think Mr. B made an increase of about 68p or something last year on his royalty collection. Meanwhile, they're still sitting on something like 10 or 15 million pounds worth of undistributed royalties. So, and that's accruing on an annual basis. And I think, what's the organisation? Sound Crowd?
SoundScan, they're the chart.
Yeah.
They administer the charts. They log the number of plays and downloads and physical copy sales.
And it makes me sick. They're measuring broadcast playout, and the broadcast playouts are underpinned by finger in the air audience measurement systems. You know, if they just let us get on with daisy chaining this all up, so that every time a piece of music was played, the artist could go, well, my piece of music was played, and I want a little royalty from it. Then there might really be a model there, but I think it highlights how much that was overinflated in the sort of 60s to 90s period. The value.
Well, and it brings up an interesting point because I was working on a project recently where they're assessing some of Nielsen's new measurement solutions, you know, for TV everywhere. And one of the things when you talk about the daisy chaining, Dom, that I find interesting is Eric points out that it's cents on the dollar, not dollars. If an artist has to go spend actual dollars to chase those cents on the dollar, they won't, or they'll do it one time and they'll stop because they realize the lawyers are making a whole lot more money than they are. But if there's an easy way for them to get essentially the micropayments, sort of the way that I do with an affiliate on Amazon, where I post a link to something if somebody wants to purchase it, and then at the end of the month I get a little thing that says, oh, you got $14 worth of referrals. That kind of thing for an artist, then they could sort of gauge what the consistency is of the money that they've got coming in, and make a more calculated decision as to whether to stay in that full time or go back and, you know, get an actual job. No offense on an actual job, but just I think that ease of getting those micropayments is going to be key to see the industry growing again.
So it's a sort of tangential jump, but somebody posted the other week about advertising and how for around about the same price as a traditional broadcasts, you know, what do you have over there, Comcast type service, or over here a Sky package and so on, you can actually get your ISP service and a bundle of Netflix, Spotify, you know, whatever the base, a core group of services, and quite easily pay for an entire ad-free existence, yet get access to almost entirely the same range of content on demand now. Cord cutting, I think, is reaching a sort of parity.
Right, but I'll immediately say that, you know, so many people who get rid of cable or get rid of satellite with the thinking that they're going to somehow save money in the long run find themselves horribly mistaken in that, because once you do get that sort of bundle of services, whether you're buying it as a bundle or whether you cobble it together yourself, and I think, Tim, you referred to this earlier, you're going to end up paying, you know, if you get a Hulu and a Netflix and you've got Amazon Prime, which you have to figure your $99 a year Amazon Prime subscription also covers free shipping and other things, but still, you're not necessarily going to save a lot of money, and you're inevitably going to miss something that you wanted to see.
I think the bit that's interesting though is I think you pay more or less the same amount of money, but you get rid of the advert. And I think it's something that we're not shy enough in the industry. We're too shy about. People still talk about how adverts aren't too bad, especially if they can be tuned to you. I totally disagree. I think adverts are hideous. I think they're insipid. They drive me crazy, and I do everything I can to avoid letting my kids sit through advertising. Now,
yeah, but remember, you're British. We're used to it over here. Well,
that is true, and it obviously it has there are certain historical cultural differences. You've always had you never had the same sort of public service broadcasting in the States. So you had to have an ad-driven model. But I struggle, or more to the point, I celebrate the fact that now you can spend $40-50 a month and have a TV experience without advertising. I think that's excellent, and I think it changes. I think it changes a lot about how kids will be as they grow up, especially. But I also think it creates a two-tier society. I think you've got the freemium society who just can't afford anything other than ad-driven stuff, and you've got a premium society who can actually go away and have a little bit more free thinking, a little bit less neuro-linguistic programming mixed in with their football.
But I agree with that completely. But let me throw something else in there, because there's also a model that says rather than paying $50 a month, I'm paying $10 a month and I'm just watching Netflix. I've talked to a number of people who say to me, I don't have TV, I have Netflix. And they're perfectly content with watching Netflix as their entertainment in the evening. You know, they're gonna probably not binge watch 5 seasons of Longmire. They're going to watch 2 episodes a night, and that will, you know, sustain them over the course of a week or a week and a half, and then they'll go on and find the next thing. That's a $10 model or a $12 model as opposed to a $50 model. So while I agree there's sort of the haves and have-nots, if the universal access in terms of free internet, so to speak, at the digital divide is there, everybody could afford to watch an on-demand world. I think where the divide may be is live content without advertising.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I agree. I think the point is, I just dream of, you know, we were talking about the music industry earlier and how actually it's kind of been laid bare again, and in terms of its micro monopolized royalty model. I think it's returned to a world where actually, you know, like the courts used to sponsor Mozart in the same way. Now you've got big brands sponsoring bands or sponsoring events or wanting to get that sort of association in there. There's something, I think, toxic about advertising unless it's extraordinarily subtle. And I think we've got to be careful not to just lull ourselves into a sense of, oh, well, that's, you know, it's got to be advertising driven, because if we don't innovate around that problem, it's a little bit like sort of going, well, you know, we can't do anything about petrochemicals, so really, why would we bother with renewables?
Can't do anything about Trump, so why would we bother?
Yeah, but
well, you know, I was at VidCon 2 weeks ago. And for those who don't know, VidCon is essentially, it started out as a YouTube convention. It has since grown to be something more than that, but YouTube is still the center of it. It's held in Anaheim every year. I believe this year, something close to 20,000 people attended, many of them teenagers. And if you went to the exhibit floor was mostly brands. It was Hershey's or Taco Bell or, you know, you name it, right? Beauty and cosmetic products. And, you know, teenagers, I think, are more, they're comfortable with the understanding that, okay, some brand is trying to sell me something, as long as they're giving me good content along with it, you know, whether it's sponsored content or whether it's product placement or branded content, they're okay with it. You know, Dom, you said that you think that advertising is especially problematic when it's not subtle, right? Or unless it's very subtle, right? Whereas I would say, unless I'm misunderstanding you, I would argue the opposite, that the more subtle the advertising is, the more insidious it is. Than people, you know, when people don't realize they're being sold to, that's more of an issue than when, oh, hey, Coca-Cola brought me this show and it's a good show, so there you go.
In fact, what's interesting, Dom, over here is for children's television, you know, basically in non-prime time, and especially on Saturday mornings, there used to be a problem where the cartoon character would segue immediately from being part of the story to suddenly being the advertiser that was selling you something. And we had laws passed, I guess, in the 60s that said you have to have a definitive break with that character essentially now saying, now I'm going to try to sell you something. Because otherwise, you know, the kids would feel like it was part of the story. And I have to agree with Eric. I think the problem with subtle advertising, and you see it with product placement in movies, etc. The problem with that is if you're buying into a particular lifestyle, and the lifestyle revolves around the content you're watching, you know, whether it's a show or what have you, that is a much harder, that's much harder to combat mentally, especially for younger people.
I suppose you know, if you take the model to a sort of a drinks party analogy, I think if somebody wandered around every 30 seconds, butting into the conversation going, "Canapes, sir, canapes, would you like canapes?" It would just drive you mad. Whereas if they're nicely out on a buffet table beside you, you know they're there if you want them, then cool. So I get having a McDonald's at a concert venue. That's cool. But it's when it rudely interrupts what you're actually trying to do, interstitial advertising, that sort of thing.
Agreed.
It's just so normalized.
Oh, that makes sense.
I never hear anyone challenge it. We just sort of go, well, it's got to be advertising. And actually, I also don't believe that most organizations who spend advertising dollars could actually defensively say we got a return on investment.
Well, I would absolutely agree. And I think the whole idea of impressions, kind of like you were talking about the finger in the wind, I think that's the big issue with things like the older Nielsen styles. We have no guarantee that there was any action that was driven off of that, which is why it is interesting to sort of see advertising integral advertising in video with hotspots could show ROI. Interstitials, I agree. I don't think we we see a benefit. So Eric, I have a question. At VidCon, you had Hershey and all these other companies on the show floor. Were they there with the idea that they were pitching the YouTube stars of today and tomorrow on, hey, we'll give you a bunch of swag if you'll promote our product? Or were they there saying, we're relevant to your generation because we'll give you good content to use as part of your, your show?
It was more of the latter, in that we're relevant to your generation. You guys like M&Ms. Here's some free M&Ms. It really was no more. I mean, there was rarely an overt connection to content at the Hershey's or Dove booth, right? It was just that this is part of your lifestyle now, along with the shows from Full Screen or whatever
Right.
MCN might be on the floor next to them. It was
Okay.
sort of, this is the whole package that you're buying into.
Okay, so you have the makers and the studios and that kind of
Right.
thing. So you're telling me that if I wanted to get lots of free food, I could actually like show up at the show and they'd hand out M&Ms.
Yeah. Except unlike at most of the shows we attend, Streaming Media East or West or NAB or IBC, you can't just go up to the counter and grab a mint and walk away and not engage with the product.
Really?
There was something you had to do something to get the swag or the candy or whatever it might be.
That's hard work for me. Maybe they're willing to do it. I don't know.
Right.
So, you could conjecture a world where Amazon has become a global monopoly on retail, and actually they don't need to advertise because everybody just knows if you want to buy something, you have to go to Amazon.com because they've put everybody else out of business. At which point they wouldn't need to promote their brand, and shopping would be. I sort of liken shopping in a. I'd love the reaction to this after this webcast goes out. I liken shopping to have a very male and female bias. There's classic images where. Which I think on a personal level I think are very true. That I go to a shopping centre. I go to the shop that sells the thing I want, and I buy it, and I leave the shopping centre. The various people who are otherwise related to me and not necessarily the same gender would not shop in the same way at all. They would go to the shopping centre and mill around until they decide they need something.
Right.
But that's hunter-gatherer versus event.
That's retail and advertising. That's retail and advertising. And I think advertising relies on trying to pump at people this idea that, maybe you didn't know about this. Now you do. You can come to us. Whereas actually, if I ever want something, I know I can just go to Amazon and buy it. I don't need any more advertising. I just need to know, yes, okay. But there is
this goes back to the listening to the live streams versus going to the concert. Those people who are related to you, not necessarily the same gender, are not going shopping to go buy something. They could buy it on Amazon just as easily as you could. They're going for part of the social aspect.
I suppose the question is, if you banned advertising, do you think that the economies would just collapse?
I do, but
yeah.
Maybe not as badly as we think.
Anyway, we've got way good. Media Advanced Forum. We had a good first strike there. We got 5 minutes left, guys. So a couple of things just to have a little think about. We're going to try and do one more show before we really ramp things up and let people know we're out here, or let a few people find the archive of this and push that out. So I think this has been a really quite, given how much the three of us have pulled our hair out with the Google Hangouts platform before we started, which being the three of us, we really shouldn't have done. Given that we've got through it and we can put this out as a bit of a taster session and invite other people to come and either tune in and listen or to join in and throw tomatoes on air like we have been, then I think we should have a little update. With the plan at the moment is we'll come back on the first Thursday of each month at 5 o'clock UK time, which is roughly what time in your neck of the woods?
Noon in Eastern and 11 a.m. for you, Eric, right?
Yep.
Okay, so hopefully you guys can all work out your different time zones having tuned in there. So first Thursday of the month at those times. If you tune in live, then you can join in or heckle or whatever it may be. We are going to do one anomalous one at the beginning of September, though, because the three of us are actually going to be in the same city for one of the few occasions in the year that we are in the same city. So we'll be on the second Thursday of the year, same time, but we'll be all clustered around a coffee table, a coffee shop table. No, what's my mind thinking about that? We'll all clustered.
You say coffee shop, Tom?
A dining table. That's the word I meant.
That sounds much better given where we're going to be.
We all clustered around a dining table or something at IBC, and just at the warm-up night for IBC on the first Thursday there. So make sure you tune into that. And I think each of us should make a commitment to go and find a guest to bring with us to the next show in July. So are you guys up for that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It sounds like church where they say, "Come, bring a friend next week." So we'll definitely do that.
They always just ask me not to come back.
Yeah, all right. We won't go there today.
Excellent. And we'll have a bit more. I think we'll make sure that some of our conversations will be deeply technical and go off on one, and other ones will be deeply non-technical. And I think today was a good precedent-setting one for the non-technical. So.
And we're, even though we're anti-advertising, or at least Dom is, we're happy to find a sponsor as well. So if somebody out there is interested in sponsoring us, especially as we head toward IBC, we'd be more than happy to have that discussion with you.
We can do product placement, can't we? Here, look.
Exactly. Like your book.
There's product placement. I hate advertising. Very good. All right, chaps. Well, look, I think that brings us to the end of our first session. And I think I should play us out with something. I think we'll pick a random sound. What should we have? Let's have this.